This is episode 100 of the Wealth Junkies Daily Show. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey. And like I said, this is episode 100. Thanks for joining us and spending, 100 episodes with us. And we continue to keep putting out daily episodes. But today we're going to celebrate episode 100 with something a little bit different. So I'll let Will introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, today we have one of our own on here, and I know Stuart, you're Brandon's dad. You were hoping so bad that Brandon would screw up the intro so you could make fun of him. And
yeah, I was thinking about it a little too much. I think
yeah,
I repeated myself, but it's okay.
No, I mean you did good. So, anyways, today on the show we have Stuart Dukeman. He's one of our partners in CEO Capital Partners, and he is also one of the advisors behind Wealth Junkies. I'm sure if you're part of the group, you've seen him commenting on some different things and giving advice and insight. He's been a business owner for over 30 years, and we're really excited to have him on. Stuart, thanks for coming on the show. Can you just give the listeners a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, thanks, guys, and hello, Brandon. Hello, Will, and hello, listeners.
Good to see you.
Happy episode 100.
Happy episode 100. It's kind of been an interesting journey to get to today, so pretty excited to be doing this. And so as far as me and my background, I'm like a lot of your guests that you've had on in the past. You start out as a young kid with entrepreneurial aspects, selling different things and so forth. But I actually started a legitimate business at 16 years old when my mother's boss had an opportunity, and she had purchased a piece of printing equipment, which was relatively new, high tech at that time, and gave me an opportunity to leverage that and get into a printing business where I would go around and solicit different businesses to advertise and do.
They had printers in 1922.
They did. In 1922,
Wow.
They actually came out with a printer that eliminated the use of labels on envelopes, and it printed directly on envelopes, which is kind of a big deal.
That's cool.
Yeah. So at 16 years old, I actually had a business and was making a little bit of money, but then I started going to a community college and in South Florida, and was working part-time doing some computer support with the franchise company called Labor Finders, and had an opportunity to come to Virginia to train a brand new manager. And to make a long story short, the manager never showed, and I ended up taking his job. And it sounded like a good opportunity for me at the time. At 19 years old, I was still living at home, and I packed up my stuff 1 week later and moved 1,000 miles away. And the only person that I knew in Virginia at the time was a waitress from the pizza shop that I had eaten at while I was up here to train that individual. And took the bold step of leaving home at 19, moving 1,000 miles away, and have turned that into career that I've been pretty happy with. That's turned into 15 franchise locations, and been president of the group for probably going on 20 years now, and life's been good. So
wow.
It's given me. It has been. Yeah. Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah,
exactly.
So but along the way, there's with as a franchise, you have a little bit laid out for you as far as the the marketing plan and the way to the method to follow, if you will. But opening up 15 different locations is actually like opening up 15 different businesses. And along the way, we've purchased quite a few properties and gotten into some side ventures and things like that. So, from a business experience standpoint, I've probably started over 30 different entities, and, had my hand in quite a few ventures over the years. And you gain a lot of experience by jumping in when you don't know the first thing about it, and you learn by doing. And that's where most of my experiences come from. It hasn't been from textbooks. It's been from real life scenarios of doing things.
School of hard knocks, right?
Yeah, a lot of hard knocks along the way, but most of them we got through and came out okay. But to be honest, we ended up with CEO Capital Partners, and we'll talk about Wealth Junkies later. But back in about 2008, I actually a little earlier, maybe 2007. I kind of got the bug. I said, hey, all my eggs are in one basket with Labor Finders. I wanted something else. I got a little bored. So I got into real estate in a very similar way that other people do. You go to a weekend seminar or local RIA meetings, which were more popular as called RIA back then, and got involved in the fix and flip world, like you will, and got my start there and did a few of those and realized that I sucked at being a landlord and had no desire to really deal directly with tenants. And then of course, I picked up a few properties, and then the market crashes. The housing market
Perfect timing.
crashes. Yeah. So between the housing market crash and my business, my labor finders focusing on construction labor, there was quite a few lousy years there where financially things kind of hit bottom, and we had to regroup and save the business. We ended up shutting down a lot of locations and took our hits, and we were able to survive. So when the recession kind of ended, we started looking at some properties from the commercial side of things to start buying and renting back to ourselves. And I satisfied my real estate itch, if you will, by buying properties that we rent back to ourselves at Labor Finder. So it's been good. But now we've kind of bought everything that we planned to buy, and I was left with no real estate pursuit. And Brandon,
you're welcome.
Yeah, Brandon comes to me and in October of 17 and says, "Hey, how do I live the lifestyle I grew up on a police officer salary?" And I kind of laughed and I said, "Well, you can always run labor finders." And he said,
you
"No."
don't.
Yeah,
that's the real answer.
And it doesn't happen magically overnight. It took me 30 years, right? So I suggested to him that he get involved in real estate, and but I didn't want anything to do with it. And when I had suggested real estate to him, I was thinking fix and flips, and it just wasn't my thing anymore. It wasn't something that I was really interested in. So I told him some books to read and some things to get started. And just like most millennials, instead of reading, he went to YouTube. And
that's what happens when it's 3 a.m. and you work midnights and you
yeah,
can't sleep.
Yeah.
So only thing to do.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks later, you came back to me and you said, "Hey, I want to do real estate. I think I'm going to go that route." And I was like, "Great." He said, "But I want to do multifamily." And I was like, "Well, great. I can't help you. I don't know anything about multifamily." And but I recalled at the time that a friend of ours had posted something recently about a multifamily project that she had in Texas. So I recommended he reach out to her, and he did. And I don't know, Brandon, if you've told this story before, but you looked into it and you ended up looking into a course regarding multifamily with a local guy, Michael Blanc, who
Will, I think he's going to be on the show here shortly.
Yeah. So you guys will have him on the show, and we credit a lot of the educational aspect to him and so forth, and we got our start in multifamily.
Well, before that, you still said, "Cool, I don't want anything to do with it."
Well, yeah, you skipped over that. You didn't want to do it at all.
And so I looked at the course. The course was at the time, I think, $2,000, and I was like, "Well, damn, I'm not spending $2,000. I'll read some more books." He calls me about a week later and says, "Hey, did you buy the course?" And I said, "No, I ordered a few more books. I'm going to read those first." He said, "Okay, well, I'll split it with you." And I was like, "Wait, you didn't want anything to do with it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I looked at it, but if it's terrible, we both lost $1,000." And so I kind of roped him back in. And
yeah, so let me explain why I had a.
You were like the superhero that's like, I'm in retirement. I'm not coming out. And then you're like, all right, whatever, I'll come out.
Yeah. So the change of heart, really, credit to Michael Blanc, and I'm sure he'll hear this and smile that he gets all the credit, but his website was full of information, and it was enough for me to learn the advantages that multifamily presented over the real estate that I currently hold in the commercial space, and then certainly over the fix and flips and the BRRRR method for single family, and it was pretty intriguing. And in my situation, I'm at the point in my life where building passive income is really the name of the game. It's at some point I don't know yet exactly what the exit strategy is for my staffing operation, but the more passive income I can build, the easier that exit strategy becomes as a whole. And multifamily presented a lot of tax advantages, which to me was pretty important. And it just presented an interesting strategy overall. So we both dug in. We got pretty involved pretty quickly. We kind of worked a plan, and we set about our journey to go after brokers and start putting in the work to find a deal. And then we found out, this is kind of hard. It's it's not as easy as buying a house, right? It's a little bit more work. The brokers doesn't matter how much money you're worth or what your experience is in the business world or whatever. It boils down to, well, what do you own from a multifamily perspective? And at the time, unfortunately, the answer was nothing. And I thought, well, gosh, I own 9 commercial buildings. Won't that be enough? And it really wasn't. It was enough for them to maybe have a conversation with you, but it wasn't really enough to get decent property sent your way. And so, we had finally, after about 8 months, we had gotten a property under LOI, and we went back and forth with the sellers for 45 days. We couldn't even get it to a contract. We went back and forth over one particular issue related to zoning, and we ended up having to back out of the deal. And at that point, you build up a lot of momentum when you're trying to launch a new business. And real estate's a little different when you're starting a business. It's not like traditional businesses where you're going after clients, right? In the real estate business, you're going after a property, and it can take a long time.
Each property is like its own standalone business.
Yeah. So
Right.
it has to be treated that way, right? So so you lose a lot of momentum, or at least we did when it was just the two of us to put all the work in to try to pull in one property. And when that deal fell through, we kind of looked at each other and it's like, gosh, all that work, and now, where do we go from here? Well, during that time, we had an opportunity with the same lady that, and that lady is Christine Jefferson. We should, call her out, and from Mission Bay Capital. We had an opportunity to co-sponsor a deal with that group that we initially passed on because we were working on our own deal. And when that deal fell through, we reached back out to Christine to say, hey, is there still an opportunity to co-sponsor with you? And the answer was yes. So I think that's probably about the time when you and I bumped into each other at the gym.
We actually bumped into each other before that. Remember,
right?
We were involved. I was involved in the 48 unit that had the zoning issues.
Oh, right.
And then after that fell through, we were all kind of looking at each other, and you were the first one to say it. You were like, why don't we all just merge together?
Yeah. Sorry, but I'm going to turn 50 this year. My memory sucks.
It's all good. We get it.
For that connect, so if anybody doesn't know, me and Will have known each other for since we were little. We played little league football together, and so
went to high school together. But we really didn't hang out. We didn't see each other after high school until I think we came together on this venture.
Yeah, and from the story I recall, you ran into my dad at the gym, right? And said,
he actually came up to me and he's like, Mr. Dukeman? I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you recognize me? And I'm like, no, I have no idea who the hell you are.
Remember 7th grade football team?
I think it was younger than that, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, Will Harvey. And I was like, what are you up to these days? And your answer was, same thing as you. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, multifamily real estate. And I was like, no kidding. So at that point, that's kind of how the three of us ended up getting together. We met, we talked, and did some things. And one thing that's really interesting in the multifamily world, and I discovered this right at the beginning when we got involved. Michael Blanc was having an event locally, and I attended, and I couldn't get over that everybody was talking about partnering. And when you're in the business world, partnering's not, or at least me growing up through the business world, partnering wasn't the norm. It was a little bit more cutthroat than that. Certainly in the single family real estate, it's cutthroat. You don't bring in 4 or 5 partners to do a deal on a single family house traditionally. And it took me a little while to wrap my head around it. And I was like, well, what's all this partnering about? And when you break it down in multifamily, there's so many moving parts and pieces to the puzzle that you need help, and you need people that specialize in one area and complement you in another area. And the great thing about that is it presents a lot of opportunities for people to get involved, and it presents opportunities for people to get involved if they have no money, but they have time, or if they have some connections, but no money, or they have a little bit of money. I mean, there's just a wide variety of ways to get involved, and really, it's an endless sea of opportunities, because as you said, Will, each property is kind of its own business. So today, while I may partner with the two of you and maybe we bring in somebody else, tomorrow I may have the opportunity to partner with 3 different people on a different property and have things going simultaneously. And, nobody's
Right.
feelings get hurt because your capacity is only so much at a time. And, it might be that I'm in on a deal leveraging maybe some net worth or some liquidity on one deal, but then, doing something else on the deal with you guys or something like that. So the really cool part is that there's plenty of opportunity for people that want to get involved as long as they're willing to, get educated on it.
Yep. That's exactly right. It's a totally different world than the whole fix and flip wholesaler universe where everybody is kind of on an island, a standalone, realtors as well. There's really no partnering in that world. So, so it was almost weird when you first start learning the concept of partnering and wrapping your brain around it. So I was the same way when I heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, in regular businesses, these days, I think partnering and kind of coming up with joint venture solutions to things is becoming a little bit more normal. But it's just not the first thing you think of. Whereas in multifamily, the first thing you get told when you're being educated about it is build your team. And initially in my world, my team translates into who am I going to hire? And
Right.
in the multifamily world, it's not like that at all. It's, who you're going to literally partner with and, how well do you get along and, what are the opportunities there? So it's been an interesting ride. We leveraged the value that we could provide to others. Whether that's on the co-sponsorship side, we help with due diligence, obviously, on a property. We help to raise capital. We help with the underwriting. We help with market research. There's all kinds of ways that we get involved now through CEO Capital Partners. But what I want to talk about a little bit is why CEO Capital Partners? What's the name
Well, that's
behind
what I was going
this?
to ask. Like, what is
Yeah.
give us the story behind the name and everything.
Well, when Brandon and I first started, before we ran into you and got involved, we have a separate company called Blue Line Investment Group, and that was how we were going to tackle things from an acquisition standpoint. But the thought process was, okay, Brandon, you have the schedule that allows you the time to focus on the brokers. Let me focus on the financing side and the money raising side, leveraging my network of business owners and things like that, and mainly talking to other CEOs. So it kind of made sense that, okay, I'm going to go after CEOs and business owners because that's my world. And why not, create a company that's focused on that? And therefore we became CEO Capital Partners when we all got together and talked about it, with the focus that we were going to present opportunities for investments to business owners and CEOs and executives, right? So, as a team between the 3 of us and David and Janet, that on the CEO Capital side, we set out to have meetings and set up meetings with different business owners and various people. And, that was going pretty well. And we were able to raise some capital and get some people involved in some of the opportunities that way. But then Brandon and I went to a conference, a real estate conference in Dallas.
So Michael Blanc
August.
event.
Another
Another Michael Blanc event.
And all these ideas
Yeah.
come from there.
Yeah,
Michael Blanc's getting some shout outs here.
Yeah, he certainly is. So we go to that event, and Brandon had already been kind of in my ear about doing a podcast, because one of the things that is popular now is to become some kind of thought leader in this space, right? So there's a lot of multifamily podcasts out there, and I was kind of resistant to doing a multifamily podcast. But what happened was we go to this event, and Joe Fairless is on stage, and Michael's interviewing him, and Brandon, I know you've told this story, but we'll tell it again. But Michael interviews Joe.
You got to say, Joe Fairless has one of the longest running daily he has the longest daily real estate podcast. I mean, he's at like 2,000 episodes,
6 years or so.
Yeah. And well respected in the space, and but what's interesting about Joe is he's a quiet guy, right? He had a marketing background, got involved with a small real estate deal in the beginning, and then has grown it to this tremendous $1 billion holding company, and pretty impressive. And, we don't know Joe very well. We met him and that's about it. And, maybe one day you get him on the show and hear his story himself. But what we did know about him was that, he was relatively first in the space, in the multifamily space with the podcast. He's been doing a daily show, and Michael had him on stage and said basically, if Armageddon happened today and you had to start from scratch, you lost all your contacts, you lost all your knowledge, where would you start? What would you do? And Joe thought about it for a second, and then his response was, well, I'd start with a podcast, but I would do it differently. And Michael says, well, what would you do differently? And the response was, I'd do it twice a day. And,
and I think at that point I zoned everything else out of the conference, because I was like, that's it.
So at that point, at that point, I know Brandon's wheels were spinning at that point. So we had been talking, and I think we did. I mean, I think we pretty much were done at that point with the rest of the conference at that point. And somehow the conversation, you and I had that evening until like 2 a.m. That night was, okay, what can we do with the podcast other than, just a multifamily podcast? And how do we, to do a daily multifamily podcast is, there's only so many people in the space, and you'll start to repeat guests and things like that. And I said, well, why don't we play off of, what we're supposed to be doing at CEO Capital is talking to business owners. And the idea was, instead of taking all these business owners to lunch and spending spending money on the lunches and getting to know them that way, why not interview them and let somebody else get a benefit out of it by hearing the stories of how people got started? And I think that's where we started kicking around some names for podcasts and so forth. And, it made me think of, well, you and Brandon are essentially, what are you after? You're after building wealth, and, you're trying to absorb all this information. And I think we kicked around and
we sat on GoDaddy and typed in 200 different domain names and
came up, and ended up coming across Wealth Junkies, and it was a premium domain name. And I said, you know what, that's the name. That's it. That's the plan right there. You guys, in my opinion, it describes you guys. You have this quest to build wealth and do it in a way that is, not really unique, but different than what the normal grow up, go to school, get a good job, put away for your retirement and go that route. And, for me, that's, I took the abnormal route myself, right? I didn't.
That route seems really boring.
Well, it does. And, I know you talk about it a lot on the show, and sometimes I kind of cringe when you guys, take a crap on the idea of going to college, but not everybody shouldn't go to college. Right. So a good example, and I tell people this all the time, is, I have 2 kids. Obviously, Brandon's one of them, and my daughter, Ashley, is the other. In my opinion, Ashley needed to go to school and get a degree and follow a particular career path. Now, it turns out she's not in the same career path anymore that she went to school for, because she hated it, which isn't a big surprise. But that was the right route for her. Brandon, on the other hand, Brandon went to college to play football instead of playing football to go to college. And if you're in the recruiting space of football, you know exactly what that means. But bottom line is, had it not been for football, Brandon probably would have found a way to get out of going and doing and finishing his degree.
Yeah, my excuse was always, well, you didn't finish college, why do I have to go?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I had over the 30 years that since I moved away from home and did all that, I've thought about going back to school multiple times. And everybody, when I think about it, I'm like, well, why am I doing that? Really, just to have the piece of paper. So there's a part of me that, there's a little bit of pride issue that says, hey, I wish I would have that degree. There's the other part of me that does feel like at times that some textbook learning would have come in handy to understand the thinking, especially when you're dealing with other larger companies and so forth. And, they come up with these complex models for pricing and things like that they learned and taught. But then I kind of laugh and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Right. So it's just, I'm not going to do that. That's not me. So there's plenty of opportunities to learn, and it didn't mean I had to go back to college and so forth. So, but what I do miss about the colleges, especially because when I was going to school, I was doing it at a community college. I still lived at home, and for the first year that I went there. But I did miss the social aspect. And I think that, there is something to be said about the connections that could be made, especially if you end up going to a big school, and you end up in a fraternity and things like that, because as we all know, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yep,
And
totally.
those connections do come in handy for a lot of people down the line. So I don't totally write off the idea of going to college, get a good job and all that, because I think for some people, they need that. Other people, if you've got the drive and the determination and the right attitude, then, and you've got a little bit of common sense, then, you'll probably be fine. You can get by without it. And I think that, business owners, if you look at small business owners, as a group, we tend to be the least educated, but then we hire people with degrees. So, that'll tell you something, right? You're like, okay, the guy that owns the business doesn't have the degree,
Yeah.
but he's got employees that do.
He surrounds himself with the people that do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one lesson I learned was always hire what you're weakest at, right? So if I own a company that required a degree for a particular thing, then I would just,
there you go,
hire
screwing
that
up
out.
the interview.
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, like I don't want, sorry, I'm trying to put everything on mute. So, for me, I mean, like, certainly I want my accountant to have a degree. I want my doctor to have a degree.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So there's certain things. I mean, there are certain people I want to have that degree, but do I want my marketing guy to have a degree? I don't care if my marketing guy has a degree. I want to hear about his results. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So
for
that stuff, the degree doesn't matter. So it just depends on what field
yeah.
it is.
And I'm not trying to crap on college degrees. I think I'm trying to crap on the idea that people push through that you have to go to college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That idea I kind of am crapping on because it's just not true.
I think it's different for everybody, right? I think that,
exactly.
I mean, listen, bottom line is, at 18 years old, did you have any idea what the heck you wanted to do, right? And that's where, when I said earlier, hey, if you do Wealth Junkies and you interview the business owners that we're trying to reach, the benefit is that the listeners who may not be in real estate or who may not be trying to do multifamily or whatever, get to hear the stories of how people got started and what it takes to run your own business. And the shows, the people that you've had on, I mean, I listen every morning, and I purposely don't listen in advance to the recordings and things like that. I listen on my way into the office, and you guys have had the complete gamut. You've had the people that were just like me, that at an early age started in a business and got started from nothing. And then you have people that had these, 18, 20, 30-year careers where they made good money and then went out on their own with the knowledge that they've gained, right? So, to me, it doesn't matter to me if your listener is, 18 years old and not sure what they want to do with their life, but they think they've been mowing lawns, they've been selling, different things online, they've been tackling things, and maybe college isn't right for them. The answer is in one of your episodes somewhere for them, right? And that was the goal. Totally. Was, hey, if we can interview business owners and still contact as many people that way for CEO Capital, and maybe get them involved in our apartment deals, and educate and hopefully liberate people, from their W-2 jobs through some advice that, one of your guests gives, then that's the best of both worlds. So we're giving, to your guests, and we're getting, by exposing you guys essentially to, 300 business owners a year get exposed to CEO Capital. So we're winning on both sides, and it's good. It's for
actually
us.
260. Remember when
I
corrected
I was
you
waiting for you. I was waiting for you to
Yeah.
jump in with that one. So.
And for people listening, it's 300 because we do these success takeaway Saturdays, and the
that would be
sneak peek.
365.
Right, that's what I meant. Whatever. I'm not the huge numbers guy at the moment. So yeah, so we take away the weekends because for the interview.
I corrected Stuart one time on Facebook, and it's kind of an inside joke there. I was wrong, he was right, and so he gives me crap.
So anyway, so that's the idea behind Wealth Junkies is.
Well, so you missed a little bit of part, and I know we've kind of talked about this before, but so after we decided on the name Wealth Junkies, it's about 2 a.m. We go to sleep. We have a flight that next morning, 10 o'clock from Dallas back to Virginia. And it's about a 3-hour flight. So we're sitting next to each other and we're go through probably 8 sheets of paper, notebook paper, write down ideas on, all sorts of stuff. And we get back to, we land, we get back in our car and start driving home. And he's like, well, we should probably tell Will that he's doing this, right? And at this point, Will had no idea
Yeah, I wasn't
any
there.
of this. He wasn't there. Nope, not part of any of it. So I'm like, all right. So we call him and we're driving home and he's like, hey, what's up? And hey, Will, good conference. By the way, you're doing a daily podcast. And you could kind of hear the silence on the phone. And Will's like, okay, well, we'll give it a shot. And so that's kind of how Will got roped into it.
I think I was like, really? Daily?
Yeah.
Can't we do weekly?
Yeah, you
Or
actually,
maybe twice a week.
You tried hard to cut it down, and Brandon,
I know.
I probably would have been more flexible, but Brandon was pretty adamant.
Yeah.
About nope, it's got to be daily, got to be daily, got to be daily.
Yep.
And Brandon has remained the adamant one throughout. I think
I think last week he said,
I agree with
you
it.
think you could drop down to 5 days a week or something? I said no.
Yeah,
it's got to be, you commit to something and you got to stick to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously doing a daily show is a tall task. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make it all happen. It's easy to jump on the interview part, and record those, which I think you guys have found out.
We thought that would be the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's good though. It's a good thing. So for me, as a dad and partner, you guys and so forth, the one thing that I really like is, the education that you guys are getting, whether you realize it or not, is incredible. Right.
Yeah, no question.
You're talking to all these business owners and you're hearing all these stories and, the opportunities that will come your way, just by making those connections and so forth. I mean, Brandon, I know you have a call, today, with one of the guests to discuss some business opportunities, and just getting out there and exposing your minds to the various things and hearing the stories. You're getting more education in 1 year than probably I got in 30 years. Right. So it's really cool. And
same with anybody listening to all these.
And anybody listening, that's exactly right. I mean, and it's you've said it multiple times on the show, about your network being your net worth. And, I think, Brandon, I recall you saying it, that, sometimes people don't know how to hang out with millionaires and business owners. They don't know how to put themselves in that setting. And you guys are solving part of that problem for them, because
if you're hanging out with us every day, you're hanging out with the same people too.
That's right. You're hanging
network.
out with them, and you may not be making the personal connection, but you're gaining the same knowledge. And that's really critical, because, you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. And I'm that way to this day. I look for opportunities where I can be the poorest one in the room, the dumbest one in the room, whatever it is. And you got two ears and one mouth. Use them proportionately, right?
Right.
Shut up and listen, because the information you get is sometimes golden. And there may not be one guest that changes your entire life, but I haven't listened to an episode yet where I haven't gotten something out of it. And especially, I like to listen on my way into the office as opposed to my way home, because when I'm driving in, I hear something. Literally, sometimes I come right into my office and I sit down and I look up more information about it, or I say, hey, we should do this or we should do that because I heard this on podcast this morning. So there's some really valuable stuff there, and it really doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're thinking about starting a business, whether you already have a business. Everybody continues to learn from somebody. I can't imagine that you would have a guest on, regardless of their level of success, who doesn't look up to somebody as a mentor or.
And that's why we ask, who's your success role model? Because everybody, at the top, they grew up looking up to somebody and
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So about CEO. So how can people get involved with that? You want to touch on that for a minute or so?
Yeah. So we actually we have a kind of a roadmap of how to get involved with us at CEO Capital, but I think let's kind of break it down, right? So the easiest way to get involved, if you don't have the funds to invest in apartments and so forth, is if you're in an area that has a lot of apartments and a lot of apartment complexes, get to know some commercial brokers and hang out where they hang out, and maybe end up bringing us a deal. And if you source a deal that works, we'll bring you in. We'll make you part of that deal, and let's see if we can't close on an apartment complex together. And that's you got to educate yourself a little bit first. There's a lot of groups. I know when Michael Blanc comes on, he's going to talk about how you can get started in multifamily real estate. But I would say today, if you're interested in getting started, just reach out to Will or Brandon and say, hey, how can I be involved in what you guys do in multifamily? I don't have any money, but I've got time, or I've got skills, or I've got contacts, or maybe you do have some money and you're interested in investing, and you want to learn what's involved in that process. So just reach out to those guys and see what opportunities exist, because we're if you go back to the partnering, we're willing to help. I mean, we're not educators in that space, but we're willing to talk to you and have a conversation about the basics and point you in the right direction and get you started. And it's something that you can do while you're working, which is nice for a lot of people.
Won't cost you a dime to hustle and meet with the brokers and
yeah,
stuff.
Sending a few emails and reaching out to a few brokers and things like that is free. And these guys can give you some tips on how you can get started and not make some rookie mistakes right out of the gate and do that type of thing. So we're always looking to expand. Predominantly we're looking for apartment complexes anywhere from probably 20 units and up. So if you think that's something you want to get involved in, reach out to these guys and figure out how you can do it. So if you're a business owner and you're looking to diversify and you're looking to own some real estate without the headache of tenants and toilets, and you want to learn more about creating some passive income, I would definitely recommend you reach out to Will or Brandon or myself. You can reach me just as easily, but go to ceocapitalpartners.com, learn a little bit more about what we do and how we do it, and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you to see if it makes sense for you. So
love it.
Yep.
It's all great stuff.
So if we could, I'd like to dive in a little bit more on the Wealth Junkie side and talk about some potential opportunities that come up there.
Let's do it, because I know every day you're sending me texts. Hey, I'm sending you texts.
Yeah,
hey, what about this? And
so
telling Will, hey, we got this idea.
Yeah, I mean, so by nature, I like to help and teach, right? So I am, I have at any given time anywhere between 53 and 55, I don't know, call it full-time employees. And over 30 years, you go through a lot of people, right? And I can count on one hand, literally on one hand, how many employees have ever stepped up and said, how do I get involved? How do I get more? How do I, what do I have to do to become an owner or whatever? And it really surprises me that that number is so low. And we're talking out of hundreds, right? So less than 5 people. And, I think for you guys, both of you, we've had obviously a lot of conversations about taking risk and doing some things. Will, you left a very good paying position with the mortgage broker. Brandon, I'm not sure, you put it out that you've left your position now and are doing this full time. The time to take the risk is when you can, right? And eventually life gets in the way. And if you're usually in one of two situations. You're usually in a really good position where you've got very few responsibilities other than to yourself. So maybe you've got rent or a mortgage and you got a car payment, maybe you have some bills or whatever, but you're not married, you don't have a kid, or the other part of life gets in the way where maybe you do have a kid, or you've gotten married, or now you've settled down and maybe you're responsible for taking care of a sibling or your parents or something like that. But the best time to take a chance is when you have very little to risk. And you guys are in that perfect scenario right now. And you both took a lot of steps to make sure that you were secure enough to take that chance. The worst case for you guys, if it doesn't work out, is you have to go get a job. And yikes, right? So there's kind of a saying, and you probably have heard it before, but employees or people with employee mentality live in fear of losing their job. People with an entrepreneur mentality live in fear of having to get a job. And you guys are both in that situation now where you are in fear of having to get a job. And that's I don't ever fear having to go get a job, right? I fear, oh my goodness, what if the economy crashes and my business goes under or whatever, but I don't have to worry about being fired. I don't have to be, walking in one day and hearing that the owner of my business decided to sell and I'm out of a job, right? So,
Right.
People talk about job security a lot and things like that. Job security is just, it really, it's what's the right word? It's an anomaly. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it's really a false sense of security, because at any given time, unless you have a contract, then you can be let go and your world can be turned upside down overnight. Whereas if you're in control of your own business, maybe you make a little less, maybe, things aren't going as well for you financially, but you're in control of your destiny. And if you're going to bet on someone, if the three of us were in a room and I had to bet on someone, I would bet on myself before I bet on one of you guys. It's just,
Right.
that's just the
I
way
feel
I
the same
am.
way.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, so taking a chance when you have that opportunity is kind of what the Wealth Junkies show is really about. And we want to figure out how to help listeners who are in that position, right? If you have the ability to take a risk, take it now. Let's figure out something to do. Reach out to one of us, whether it's on Facebook or through email, or find a way to contact us. It's pretty easy. We give out contact information all the time, and just say, hey, I'm looking at doing this, or I don't even have an idea of what I want to do, but I like what the show's about, and I like what people are saying. We're here to help. I mean, we don't, at the moment, we don't have a single program where we charge you a dime. We don't have anything. And Will and Brandon have shared emails where they've gotten from some listeners and things like that. And it's just cool to help people get started. We've got CEO capital. We've got other ways that we plan to make money. We do want to introduce some things to the Wealth Junkies audience to help them get started, but we want to be able to do it in an economical way that makes sense. But if you're in that position and you haven't taken any action, but you're listening on a regular basis, reach out. Let's have a conversation. Let's get on a Zoom call. Let's do something, and let's see what we can't make happen. Engage in the group on Facebook. Do whatever you got to do. So let's see if we can't help it out. And we've talked about doing some partnering programs where if you've got a business idea and you don't have enough money to get started, reach out. Maybe we're interested, right? So there's a lot of advantages to having the platform you guys have and being exposed to that. And Will, I hear you ask your guests on a regular basis, well, where do you see your business? What are your needs for the business? And it's interesting that none of your guests really ask for much, right? They tell you what their plan is. So I'm going to ask today, right? I'm going to ask, help us build Wealth Junkies by helping make success stories with you as a listener, right? So if you've got something and you've got an idea and you need some help or whatever, we may not know all the answers, but we may know how to find them quicker than you or whatever.
Put you in contact with with somebody that does. I mean, we've had 100 episodes so far. Those are contacts that we have. All these guests, we have their email, we have their phone number. They're one click away for us to say, hey, would you mind answering this question, or would you mind speaking with this individual or something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for the listeners to understand that when you guys approach guests, they fully understand that your audience, that they understand the mission of Wealth Junkies, which is to help liberate 1,000 people from their W-2 jobs and get started on their own, right? They're coming on, and of course they're coming on to promote what they do, but they're coming on with the understanding that they're also supposed to be helping, right? And many of them, if not all of them, have that attitude. They're all willing to help. Most people that are successful have helped people along the way because they don't view you as competition. They're proud to share what they've learned. So that's my mission, is to kind of be behind the scenes. I'm not obviously on the podcast daily, but I am behind the scenes. I'm ready, willing, and wanting to help people. So reach out and let's see what we can do. Let's
love that.
Create some businesses.
Amen. That's good stuff.
Perfect.
And so that's my story.
Yeah.
That's kind of a mic drop.
Yeah.
The short version.
Right. Well, that was a great story. We can see that you got passion behind what you're doing, and we definitely see you get real excited on the Facebook group, and you added a ton of value there. So we appreciate everything that you're doing here and how you're contributing to it. So we're excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait for what this looks like in another year or two.
Episode 200, episode 300.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you guys,
Cool.
it's an exciting opportunity. I think we've talked about it over and over, and I don't want to beat it to death, but I'm, as a dad, I'm thrilled, right? Because I think the future is huge for both of you guys, and I think it's going to be really cool to see where this thing goes, and this is just the beginning.
Love it.
Yeah. So I guess it's time for moments of truth questions.
Moments of truth.
All right. So I know you were telling me you were prepared for them, so we'll see.
I prepared for two, so we'll see how this goes.
Okay. Who is your success role model?
I didn't prepare for that one. Damn it. Actually,
Come on,
no.
You were just talking about that.
No. I'll tell you. So I lived the rich dad, poor dad scenario, right? So my father he passed away last year. I don't know this as a fact, but my mother, in one of her many arguments with my dad, let me know or let it out that my dad never earned more than $35,000 a year in his entire life, which struck me as really surprising, given that I didn't grow up feeling like we were poor. I felt like we were, always able to do some things or whatever. I just know, as a little kid, I wasn't allowed to have the Levi corduroys, which you guys wouldn't even know what the hell that means, but that was a big deal. So I was wearing the generic jeans and things like that, but I never really realized that my parents struggled as much as they did until I got older. So I had the rich dad, poor dad lifestyle because the business owner that hired me when I was 19 years old, essentially became the model rich dad in my life, and in a lot of ways, became more of a father figure to me from a business standpoint than anything else. So a little bit shout out to him. His name is Doug Doxey, and I would say he's been my role model because I've learned a tremendous amount from him.
That's great. That's important. What is your biggest success?
Lasting 30 years in the labor finder staffing business. In fact, it's 30 years this month.
You're not going to say your kids or your family, or
no, I'm not going to say my kids or my family, because I'll tell you what, no.
It got tight about 10 years ago, right?
It really did. It was some pretty rough times, and
as it was for a lot of other business owners as well.
Yeah, and we came through it, and we're a franchise that has 200 offices across the country, but we're a really tight-knit group of franchise owners, and we all made it through, which is pretty impressive. And we've grown up together. I've known other owners for going on 20, 30 years now. So really building it into going from an employee who made $20,000 a year to owning the company and turning it into what it is today is a huge accomplishment that I view it. So I think that's something to be said. And I usually don't give myself credit for it. So that's my biggest success officially on air.
That's great.
What does a typical day look like for you?
I still go to the office almost every single day. So I'm up by 6 a.m. My wife still works, as you know. She's a teacher, and she still enjoys that. So she, we have a relatively normal weekday schedule. I'm in the office by 8:15. I spend most of my time on the financial side of the business these days, and putting out a lot of fires. The bigger you get, the bigger the target on your back gets. And on any given day, we employ about 700 people out in the field. So we have quite a busy day that goes on for the most part. We try to keep a relatively lean staff to handle all of that. So typical day for me is at the office, and with real estate, I have a lot of flexibility with my schedule during the day. So these days, probably about 30 to 40% of my time is spent on real estate deals and multifamily related calls and so forth. And then for the last probably 6-8 months, I leave work, I go to the gym, I go home, eat dinner, and I'm right back at it with real estate. Making money has become a hobby to me.
You're jumping
and
ahead questions here.
yeah. So yeah. All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, that's my day is work, work, work. I actually like working.
Yeah. If you enjoy it, that is a hobby.
Yeah. If you enjoy what you do.
Right. What's your favorite quote?
So I wrote it down. If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. And
that's good.
That's Jim Rohn, who's a very popular marketing guy from the past or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah,
he's been brought up multiple times.
Yep.
Yeah, he's great.
Well, other than making money, what are some of your hobbies?
So I used to golf, and I haven't been able to swing a golf club in a few years now, but due to some back problems. But I hope to get back into playing golf. But that's kind of the problem, is when you're a little bit of a workaholic, your hobby tends to become your work. And creating businesses, and I'm an idea junkie, right? So I like to
you're a
come
visionary.
up with, yeah, it's fun to me, right? So I get excited about when somebody comes to me with an idea. I get excited about that, and I could spend all day or all evening talking about that and seeing it develop. And sometimes it just doesn't go anywhere, but I view that, that's part of the steps of being successful. You have to, kill off a lot of things before you find something that you go with and you move forward with. So
that's right.
Need some work in the hobby area.
Yeah. What's the best business book that you've read?
So Extreme Ownership, which is how the Navy SEALs lead and win.
So Jocko
Willink and Leif Babin. It's I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did, but it really it didn't. I didn't feel like it helped me per se, but it was a great book for me to implement in my business, because I have a lot of middle management people, and at the time when I read the book, there was a lot of finger pointing that was always going on, and it was never anybody's fault, and some things that happened there. And what the book really teaches you is accountability, and it what the Navy SEAL program teaches these guys, and is that it's not the team, it's the leader. It's and what the best example in the book was, they had a competition, and I don't remember what it's called, and I was never in the Marines or the Navy or anything like that, but the competition was that a team of 6, let's say, had to carry a very heavy boat or something to the water, whatever it was, and it was kind of a relay race of 4 teams, and they took the winning team leader after the first round, and they put him on the losing team, and that team won it. And what it showed was that everybody that you employ has the capability of doing the job. They just need to be led properly.
Right.
And so for me, it was a little bit of a wake up call that, hey, people will only do as they see me do, and respond to what I implement company wide. But it basically said, there's a lot of good people out there that are just kind of lost, right? And they just don't know what direction to follow. And sometimes, that's all they need is a good leader to help them get there. And there's a big difference in my mind. I'm big on be a leader versus be a boss. Right? A boss demands, and leader is a leader. So that book is real high in my list.
That's great.
Yeah. Last question: if there's one key piece of advice you can leave our listeners with about achieving success, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, I think I already said it. If you are in the position where where you have the ability to take the risk, get some help, find a mentor, find a buddy, I'm a huge mastermind thought process guy. I think anytime you can get in a group of people to hold you accountable and kick ideas around, you're going to be way, way better off. There's been too many times where I try to sit on my own and think of things through, and you never think of anything. And you may think you have the greatest idea in the world, and then you talk to other people and they're like, yeah, that's terrible. But
yeah, right.
you don't want the group that says, yeah, that's terrible. You want the group that says, yeah, that's not so great, but what if you did it this way?
Here's a tweak I would recommend.
Right. You don't want the Debbie Downers. You want people that are willing to give you feedback and willing to help you build it. So if you're in a position where you can take that risk, take the risk, but find the right group to do it with. And if you're not in a position to take the risk, find a side hustle that you can build in the meantime. And we've got some ideas where you guys, if you aren't reaching out to Will and Brandon to have some kind of conversation, you're kind of missing out. These guys have a ton of ideas going on in their head. There's a ton of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Reach out and have those conversations. Let's see what we can do. So
love that. Good stuff.
Yep. Well, Stuart, Dad, appreciate you coming on and celebrating the 100th episode and kind of talking about what we're doing here and your story. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
So yeah,
looking forward to episode 200.
Yeah,
that's right.
We got big things planned for it. So, but
that's right. Well, how can I think you forgot to ask, Brandon? How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is Stuart at ceocapitalpartners.com, and it's STUART at ceocapitalpartners.com.
Perfect.
You can certainly visit the website for more information there.
Cool.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And we'll see everybody tomorrow for episode 101.